Bob and Anita published published quite a bit in RTM, including winning a couple of Holland Awards. So it's great to have them back here. Today, they're going to be talking about dynamic portfolio management in new product development. Bob has written extensively about stage gate and new product development. Anita and Bob together combined and put stuff together around agile stage gate, which I think was quite a useful construct. And now they'll be talking about dynamic portfolio management. If I could just briefly summarize, it's the notion is that the world changes and you need to update your business analysis as the world changes in order to optimize your portfolio over time. And they have some tools that help to do that. So I hope I haven't bastardized your summary too much. And I'm just gonna, I think both of you have no need for further introduction, but if you want to give brief introductions to yourselves, that'd be fine.
Well, Jim, now that you've covered the talk, I guess we're going to all go home now, right?
Well, we still got Q&A, so I think we're going to try to do have you guys cover in half an hour the basic tools and approaches, and then people have read your paper, so presumably they'll have a chance to ask questions. Right. I'd suggest as you go along, pop your questions into chat, and then when we reach the appropriate point, I'll pull out of chat. I'll ask you to clarify your question in some instances and let you guys respond to them. So it gives a chance for people to go deeper than simply reviewing your paper.
Okay.
So Bob, are you going to begin? Anita?
No, I think Anita's going to begin if we get the slides up. We have about 10 or 15 slides, not 3.
Great. Yeah, so yeah, I got the intro, but I think you did it so well, Jim. So maybe I'll just skip through a little shortly. Just yeah, you already introduced the paper. If you can go to the next slide, Sabrina. Just want to share my gratitude to have been able to work with Bob on this work. Absolutely amazing, and so grateful to have you as a mentor and friend over these past many years. And I think this article is really where we are looking at, can you say, the next step on portfolio management and how we can contribute into really shifting from process to value focus. And doing this work together has been absolutely amazing, and also with the IRI. So I won't be doing any further introductions of us at this time. So I'll just give it to you, Bob, to introduce.
Well, I should say a few more things about Anita. She is a good friend, and we've worked together on a number of articles, Jim, not just in research technology management, but also in other ones, other fields too, other journals. And Anita actually has the unique distinction of being not only a university professor, previously at the Cambridge University in the UK, but also she is on the leadership team. She's on the executive team at Lego. So now that's her full-time job. And she also led the initiative to transform Lego to an agile organization, including product development. Now she's into leading the transformation to a environmentally friendly company and ESG, all that stuff. So she's got a lot of practical experience, plus the academic and theory as well, which is sort of unique in industry these days. Okay, can we get into the next slide?
Oh, thank you, Bob.
Folks, if you think about it, there's 2 ways to win at new products. I had a chat with a group at DuPont yesterday, and they basically agreed with this 100%. In fact, they started the conversation by, we do projects right. We got this stage and gate and whatever process, and we have smart people, and we follow it diligently, and we do the voice of customer and all those things, but we're not doing the right projects. We got some of the smartest chemists in the world, and they can solve any problem, but they're working on the wrong problems. I mean, you think about it. So much has been done on how you run projects, how you put together an effective team, how you do the upfront homework, etc. And relatively little work has been done on project selection. Which projects do you do? Making the right investment decisions, knowing when to hold them, when to fold them, when to run, when to walk away. That's the key here. And it's a term, portfolio management is a term that was introduced into our lingo in the 1990s by a large Boston consulting group. Basically saying that all projects, all new product projects are investments, and like portfolios in the stock market and bond market, they can be run like that. It's about project selection, it's about picking winners, and it's about making the right R&D investments. That's what portfolio management is. Can we have the next slide? But there's major problems here. This is some new stuff that wasn't in the article that just came out in the last month from the PDMA in an article in their journal. It's their best practices study, and they do one of these best practices study about every 5 years. And they found that the worst area was portfolio management in terms of company practices. Less than half the companies, 49% of the best companies, have a formal new product process. And they defined the best companies as the top 1/3. The top 1/3 in terms of overall new product development performance based on a number of criteria. The rest of the companies were even worse. They rated very mediocre in terms of prioritization of projects. In other words, all projects are top priority. They rated very poorly in terms of undertaking repeated decision analyses, what Jim was just saying, updating the business case and making go kill decisions along the way. In other words, once the project starts, it's like a commuter train rolling down the track and never stopping at any station. And it's hard to get in front of a speeding train. And they also were rated very poorly in considering their resource capacities. Now, the results of all of this bad practice is terrible. Look at this. 56% of new project launches succeed. Now, I know the number tends to be a little higher in some studies. 65% is another one. This happened to be the PDMA number. And that was measured in terms of 5-year profitability. But if you know, the generally accepted number is somewhere between 60 and 65% of new product launches succeed. But if you start the clock ticking, I mean, starting the clock ticking the day before a launch is pretty late in the game. If you start the clock ticking earlier, say the beginning of development, 1 in 4 projects that is approved for development becomes a commercial success. That's 25% batting average. I hope you can make better decisions. I mean, a toss of a coin would give you 50%. And there are some models out there that give as high as 80%. But management bats 25%. If we could only improve that to say 40% or 50%, think how much more productive your R&D would be. So while it's great to focus on the process of innovation, how about focusing on the issue of picking the right projects? Next slide.
Yeah, so based on exactly what Bob is saying, that failure rate is quite high, right? It's too high, and we are losing too much value in industry based on you know those stats that we're seeing. So what is then the role of dynamic portfolio management? Well, basically, the reasoning for adapting to this is because things are changing. Not only do we have a lot more variables to deal with, but we also have a rate of change that is increasing. And it's now, the pace of change is now so fast that we are having a pace of change that is even shorter than the time it takes to go to market with a product. So what metrics to use in such situations? Well, we can definitely not use our backward knowledge to understand the future. We have to have a forward-facing way of understanding value. And we cannot just base it on process either. And definitely not only with one go and kill decision in our setup. And yeah, a good friend of ours, Bob and Anita, who is the VP of Engineering at Danfoss, is also, they changed their way of working as well, improving their stage gate model and getting agile into their model, but also at the portfolio level now, making sure that they have a governance around the go kill decisions, making sure that they focus on the process value instead of the process, I say classic iron triangle of the project, and making sure they understand the value of the project all the way through. All right, so next slide, please. Yeah, so this is very much integrated into the Agile stage gate model, is that you make sure to have your iterations, not only in the beginning, but all throughout the stages in your product development project. In the beginning, the key is understanding what is value to our customers, who are our customers even, and making sure that you actively include them in the early stages, especially building the business case. Understanding your customers is key. Again, back to Danfoss, they even implemented a decision gate where you could not pass the gate to go to development stage unless you had customer or even consumer. With the thermostat, it was consumer review. I knew some of the engineers they're sharing, in the beginning, they were actually a little discontent with having to do all of that work to get consumers in. And, they had this brilliant product. Why have to have consumer in really early? But they actually realized that the product they ended up delivering to the market was completely different than what they thought the market wanted. And that was those early iterations together with the consumers that drove their understanding of what is value. Once you understand what is valuable, you want to continue having those iterations around your prototypes, even in the development stage, leveraging software technologies, making sure that you can build prototypes and run with those in the development test. Right. And in the final stages, making sure you have final consumer tests, because this is really driving your decision making and understanding where is this going. But that also means that you're not fixing your design up front and then just going with it based on the iron triangle. You actually keep developing the idea as you're learning. So it becomes a learning process all the way through.
Can I make a comment, Anita? And this is a very important topic Anita's talking about. And Lego does it very well. So well that you sort of assume everybody else does it well. Lego's built in an agile way of working into the gating process. And this is just an attempt to show some of the...
So we should have the productivity index up now, Sabrina, if you can move to the next slide.
Okay, no. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Great. So if we look at value, the first step in understanding value is the financial value, right? Economic value. And here we are introducing the productivity index also in the article. And basically that is a measure of output versus input. So what is the net present value of your project, in relation to the dollars that you remain to be spent, or the resources needed to complete the project. So what you would expect in a healthy project is that this curve will go up, right? Like the blue curve that you're seeing there. And then you can look for the trend if it's not, right? So based on your value understanding, your iterations, you're going, you might experience that you're not following the curve. And this is an example of it, Project Delta, where you can see, okay, actually there where you have the by month 7, we clearly have a project in trouble. It's not following the blue line as we would expect. And then that's when you can start to make your new trajectories around your productivity index and use that for smart decision making. But this is only the financial part. So value is so much more than only the financial aspects to it. So over to you, Bob. And the next slide, please.
Before I get into this, I assume, Jim, you can hear me.
And now you're muted, Bob. This is odd.
No. Okay, because am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. I think Anita could not hear me before. So let me just go back to a very important point she was making. Lego and other companies have implemented an agile approach within the gating process, and they've done it so well they almost take it for granted that all of us have done it. And it's worthwhile taking a minute here for all of us that haven't done it. What they're doing is building multiple iterations, and every iteration ends with a demo to the stakeholders. And that means demoing your product, typically the customers and management, the results of the work of the previous 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever your sprint lengths are. And it's at these demos you get product validation, true, but you get a lot of more information too. You get data that you can use to update your business case. by building the prototype or the prototype or the protocept or whatever it is you're building, you get input in terms of costs to manufacture, product design, purchase intent from customers, etc., that are very, very valuable pieces of information to go into the business case, to update the business case in real time. So it's a real-time updated business case. That's critical to understand as we talk about this dynamic portfolio management that Jim mentioned at the beginning. Constantly updated business cases with constantly real-time new data, the result of these constant iterations. By the way, a German study revealed, the Germans are very much into this, a German study revealed that the typical number of iterations during the development phase alone, that middle phase here, is about 7 on average. So if the development phase were, say, a year, that's typically iterations of about 1 or 2 months each, that sort of order of magnitude. Okay, can we flip forward 2 slides to where I was supposed to be? Okay, this is picking up on what Anita said, is that financial tools are not always right for all projects. In fact, I've seen some companies that use financial models that are so sophisticated. It's incredible. The sophistication of most models is far beyond the accuracy of the data input. And as we all know, in the center box there, garbage in equals garbage out. And one of the other things that we may not be aware of is if you use strictly financial models, and most people do use financial models, NPV is by far the most popular financial tool for gauging projects' value, you tend to end up with a low value portfolio simply because a rigorous financial analysis with probability adjustments built in will always kill the big, exciting projects with high degrees of uncertainty. Financial analysis tends to favor the low-hanging fruit, which is sort of unfortunate with a portfolio of tweaks, modifications, extensions, and rather boring products. And the big ones are going to get killed. So we need some better approaches than strictly financial analysis. This cartoon here, I'm sure you've seen it before. It just goes to point out the fallaciousness or the fail points of a financial model. Dilbert saying, I predict sales to be nothing for 2 years and then take a sudden surge. The surge was added so I could get the business case approved. The 2-year lag gives me time to get promoted. How true. I've seen that in companies. That really happens. What about accountability? That's where you come in. How true. So financial models are not to be necessarily believed because of the inaccuracy of the data. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay. One of the things that comes out again and again in studies of best practices and results is that scoring models, although they tend to be more qualitative, are actually more predictive than financial models, which are very quantitative. Scoring models have been around for a while. There have been numerous best practice studies. They rate very well in terms of management's liking of them. They think they make good decisions, they make better decisions, etc. I've seen some companies develop scoring models internally. For example, Procter & Gamble had a very good one that they developed based on studying something like 60 new product projects, half successes, half failures, and they literally developed the scoring model based on those studies. And it was about 75, 80% predictive, far better than that 25% we get for management. So scoring models are based on the theory that qualitative factors, such as product advantage or market attractiveness, or competitive leverage. Qualitative factors predict new product success and value better than quantitative factors, such as net present value or return on investment. And basically, a scoring model relies on those factors that are proven to be correlated with success and value to the company. And the question is, what are those factors? Well, guys, there's been many, many studies done over the last 30 years on what factors correlate with success. And I'll give you a hint. The strongest one is a competitive advantage gained through a unique superior product with a compelling value proposition. That one factor alone accounts for about 26% of profitability right there. So if that's not in your model, you're missing 26% of profits right there. Market attractiveness is another one. Strategic fit, how well the project fits with your strategy. Believe it or not, on strategy projects have a higher success rate because they take you into the oasis and steer you out of the desert. That's what strategy is all about, giving you direction. So you build a scoring model based on these known factors, a point count system. And then once you have a scorecard, you use them at gate meetings with the gatekeepers. In other words, managers, the gatekeepers, the decision makers, the resource owners actually fill out the scorecard and display the results on the screen. These scorecard scores can also be used at portfolio reviews, which are typically held quarterly, where you look at the whole list of projects together. And the name of the game here, guys, is that we really have to choose factors in developing a scorecard that really do discriminate between winners and losers, and you can prove it. Now, unless you want to spend a bag of money doing that research, and it's a lot of research that Procter & Gamble and other companies did to figure out what these factors are, maybe we ought to take a look at one that we've put together as an example of an excellent best in practice and 100% based on research. Next slide. The 5, some people call them 6, if you want to split the last one into 2. The 5 factors that come out the strongest, and there's others other than these, but these account for the majority of profitability. Something like 85% of new product profits can be explained by these 5 factors. Does this project fit our mission and our strategy? One of the important things that we need to mention, and I mentioned it in passing, is Lego and other companies have a strong mission to improve the environment, to reduce the carbon footprint. ESG is becoming very, very critical and must be built in to the project selection decision. The second key factor is the customer energizer. Does this new product excite the customer? By the way, there's a typo here. I'm going to fix these slides. This text got out of place on the right-hand side. I'm going to send you a new set of slides here, Sabrina. My error, sorry. Customer energizer. Does the new product create a wow factor from the customer? Elicit a wow response when the customer sees it. Is it a unique, superior product? Is it a compelling value proposition? Will they line up around the block for 24 hours to get that next iPad? And if not, you don't have a winner. Now, this is a phrase, this customer energizers is actually a phrase I stole from 3M. Third one, does this project leverage our strengths? You've heard of the adage, always attack from strengths. Well, it's true. Projects that leverage your core competencies and knowledge and familiarity in areas such as marketing, sales, R&D, and manufacturing have a higher success rate. Golly gee whiz, if that's true, then that ought to be a factor in our scoring model. Technical feasibility is another key one. What's the size of the technical gap? How complex is this project technically? Are there many technical hurdles? Or is it very straightforward and I can already envision a technical solution? And do we have proof of concept? And then finally, reward and risk. Now, as I said here, there's an error on this slide. We're going to redo this slide. Some of the text in the light blue areas are incorrect. So these are the key factors. Next slide. And this is the scorecard. Here are the 5 factors on the left side. It's a scorecard that's a 1 to 5 scale. 1, 3, and 5 are across the top, but the scores are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that go in the far right column. And the phrases in the middle, these are the anchor phrases. Here's what a 1 means, here's what a 3 means, here's what a 5 means. This card is literally used at a gate meeting. It's some people print it out on paper and the gatekeepers fill it out. Some people do it on an iPad. So you need a little bit of software to translate the scores into something that can be aggregated on a screen. Next slide. Anita.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Great, thank you, and sorry about the audio issues. When we go into the gate meetings, there's also a bit of some points in the articles that we want to make is how to apply the value-based scorecard in the meeting. And there's these 3 simple steps that you want to take before you actually go and start using the value-based scorecard. And the first one, it seems simple, readiness check. Do you have the deliverables in place? Do you have the quality of the execution? Do you have the data? If no, you don't want to do the gate meeting, you want to actually make sure you do rework and get the data. And I think also, Bob, you shared how many companies actually go into gate meetings without being well prepared. And so there's something around the structure here, making sure that you're actually ready to go in and make a decision based on data. So that's the first step. The second step,
Anita, maybe you could comment on Lego's approach to the readiness questions too. Based on the technology readiness type questions, is it ready? You have some questions on that too. I think it's the next slide. That's a key point here, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that comes on the next slide. So I'll elaborate there. Yeah, exactly. Right. So the second one is the business evaluation based on project value. So not the process. Are we on time? Are we on budget? Are we on scope? But rather, what is the value that the project is bringing? And that's actually quite a shift for a lot of stakeholders that are used to just making sure that you follow the process you set up in the beginning, but never even asking about the value. What is the value that we really want to create here? So that is a shift in mindset. A lot of times it's kind of assumed that the project will bring the value that was in the business case, but as value and the environment around your project is changing, you actually want to be curious about the value. And then finally, this decision and resource commitment. There are actually a challenge that a lot of times companies have too many projects going on at the same time. You want to make sure you have resources available. Now, I'm not recommending doing portfolio resource management down to the detail, because with high uncertainty, experience is just that you put in too much effort compared to the value coming out. But kind of small, medium, large, how much resources are we needing? Do we have those available? And do we have the right focus and commitment of those resources for this project before we move on? Yeah, next slide. So as Bob mentioned, there are these readiness check questions, and when I was in our innovation department, we were elaborating how can we make sure that we have our projects ready for moving for the next stage, doing that iterative learning demonstrator, then moving into the pilot, and then moving into development. How do we make sure that we're ready for the next step? And I looked into some of the big, readiness sheets. I mean, Coca-Cola was one of them that was available. Actually, I think it's freely available online. There were a couple of other big spreadsheets, and that just seemed like such a huge work for project managers to make sure that you filled in a lot of risk assessment down to much of detail. But okay, there must be a simpler way for us to have a quick, lightweight, but quantifiable and validated assessment of readiness. And this is the list that we're proposing. Making sure I'll just quickly briefly go through here. To what extent have you had that expected value increment in the states that you set forth, right? So in the agile way of thinking, you want to have a value increment. You actually want to learn something during the stage that you were through. What is that learning? What is that value increment you've had in your project? Have you assessed what is it that you want to have in terms of value increment in the next stage? Do you have that ready? To what extent are the target customer actively involved? We have been through that already. To which degree do you have your functional and development support from the different departments? And how mature is the technology? Are you trying to revolutionize something where you are a first mover, right? Then the likelihood of success is lower. And do you have that capabilities at hand? So it might be a known technology, but if you don't have that capability developed in-house, say AI is a big thing right now. Do you have AI trainers? Do you have machine learning teams? Is it the right type? If you want to integrate that. So those are important questions to really ask. A couple of other questions there, right? So this is a quite easy tick box list. So you don't have to do a huge amount of work, but it still quantifies in terms of are we then ready to move to the next level. All right, next slide. And this is an example also from the article on how this is a project UV Dental, where evaluators are then rating the project value on these different value areas that Bob presented before. So strategy and mission, customer energizer, synergy and familiarity, technical feasibility, and reward versus risk, giving it a subjective measure. And I think my best analogy coming from the agile world is that this is a bit like planning poker. Research shows that, even though it's a subjective measure of complexity that you show with the planning poker card, when you use it as a dialogue tool across the room with a group of experts, you actually get a fairly accurate result, especially when you compare across different projects. It will rate the project relatively in the portfolio to a quite high accuracy compared to gut feeling or who shouts the loudest in the room, right? So this is a way of quantifying value in these 5 categories. Now, these are the evaluators as an example. You also have the team score there on the bottom. And if the mean of the evaluators is significantly different from the team score, that is when you want to have that dialogue. Have we been clear enough? Have we been communicating as a team clear enough for our evaluators what really the value of this project will bring? So again, back to this is a dialogue tool. It's quantifying so that you can have a dialogue around decision making in your stage gate, in your gate process. Next slide. Could go into a lot of details here. Right. So what happens when you then have scored the projects is that you can rate them into a 2x2 matrix. And who doesn't love a simple 2x2? So this is a classic one, with the potential stars being high visibility, high opportunity. You have your high risk bets there in less visibility, but still high opportunity, and your conservative bets. And of course, you don't want to go for the ones that are in low opportunity, low feasibility. But this is really a way to compare not only the different scorings from the different teams. That's where you have the dialogue, but you can also use it to score projects across. I use that very actively right now on sustainability projects. So it's not products for the market, but the sustainability projects fit really well into this system as well, where we are looking at feasibility and opportunity. So we want to go for those potential stars first, and we use this as a dialogue tool where it's being rated by the various teams, the value that we're bringing. And again, back to this being a dialogue, because you might have some disagreeing, and then that's interesting, because what is it then we're disagreeing on? Because we really want to understand value from the customer perspective. So that's what we're going for. Yeah. Next one.
Can you just go? I think the next one's mine, Anita, but can you just go back to the one that Anita was talking about, because she made some very important points, and I just wanted to go back one more. This slide here, very powerful. Anita started to get into the dialogue aspect. I heard one guy in a company, the process manager, the head of the PMO, project management office, say, in the meetings, we don't even look at the final score. And the final score on this project, I think, is 73.6. You see it over on the right-hand side, down near the bottom. That's a pretty good score, minimum being 65. Fantastic project is 85. He says, we just look for differences. We look for patterns. And this is a basis for discussion. For example, when you read down that customer energizer column, that's the 3rd column in, you see the first guy gives it a 5. The 4th guy gives it a 1. Well, are these guys on the same planet? Are they talking about the same project? So if you're the facilitator of this meeting, and by the way, you need a facilitator to make this work. If you're the facilitator, you say, well, who was the person that said 5? Oh, HA and RS. Can you guys explain why you gave it a 5 and why you gave it a 1? And wow, what a discussion ensues, because these guys are seeing it from very different points of view. So this is very critical. And also the team one, as Anita mentioned, by the way, don't put the team score up before the gatekeeper score. That's biasing their scores. One more, and there was a question from the chat that I saw. How can you convince senior management that these scores are reliable? Well, I'll give you one hint, and Anita started to get into it. They're a lot more reliable than financial numbers. Financial numbers, the people that have studied financial numbers given in a business case versus what happened in the post-launch review, compare the two numbers, are wrong by orders of magnitude. So the NPV is wrong by a factor of 2 or 3, probably. So these numbers are a lot more accurate than that. In fact, there was a Dutch university that tested these models like this and found an average predictability of about 80-something%, which is really good. And I think Procter & Gamble saw theirs at around 80% also. So these are surprisingly accurate and predictive, a hell of a lot more than the financial models you're using. Now, I'm not saying throw out financial models, of course not. That's one piece of data. So can we go to the slide I was supposed to talk about, which was perhaps not as important? This came out of an IRI study that Kleinschmidt and I did a few years ago. This, you know, when you're having your portfolio reviews, the whole point of this slide was is the one thing to think about when you're having your portfolio reviews is to make sure that you look at the split in resources across project types versus what you think it should ideally be in your business. Okay, and this is just average across IRI companies. And while average is not necessarily the goal, at least it's an indication. Next slide. And this was just an example of a forced ranking exercise at a portfolio review of a company in, I believe it was the clay business. And they were using their material to make a number of, and these are all major projects. They're using their clay to make as an additive in the paper industry, in the cosmetic industry, and drilling fluids, etc. So they have a number of other major projects. This is one bucket, and they have typical costs in here, development costs, etc. The net present value as calculated from the most recent gate meeting. They calculate the productivity index. They also have the value-based scorecard score. That's column number 4. And what they actually do in this portfolio review is do a forced ranking of the projects. They had 6 projects. They literally forced ranked them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then they talk about the costs per quarter. And they got an annual budget, which can be translated into a quarterly budget for R&D costs in this particular case. And it turns out that when you do the forced ranking and add them up, and that's column 6, you hit the limit after the 4th project. So what do? Well, the default option is do all 6 projects and guarantee that all will be late. And that is usually the default option. That's what most companies do. They overload their pipeline. They do all the projects. They don't know how to say no to any of them. And they wonder why all their projects are late. But we're suggesting maybe a tougher approach here. Learn to say no. Learn, as the Kenny Rogers song went, know when to hold them and know when to walk away and know when to fold them. And what the suggestion here is in this model is put the last 2 projects on hold and redirect the resources to the first 4 and get them done on time. Focus. So this is just an example of using the value-based scorecard and the productivity index together as a way of handling the ranking exercise that you should be doing at a portfolio review. Okay, I think that's the last slide. Maybe we could take some of the questions. Jim, did you want to host the questions?
Yes, I will do that. But you know, I prefer if we can have people, you know, express their question. So
Okay,
I'll look at them and then I'll ask. Sunil raised the question: how do you build confidence in the scoring model with non-financial factors? I guess, Sunil, maybe another way of that is, how do you make sure people aren't gaming the system, which was sort of my question. Sunil, do you want to add anything to that before we let Bob and Anita address it?
Yeah, this I think this whole idea of using NPV and other things for new innovation type of projects is not a good thing, and I think we're starting to understand within Carlyle the truth of that as well. But when we talk about other non-financial metrics, if you start from nothing, we need to get some sort of alignment within our company to say, hey, this is the right way to do it. So I'm not saying we're not already doing it. We're doing something like this, but I wanted to hear your perspectives on how to convince those who may not see it that same way.
Well, I think one way, and I'll let Anita handle this too. I think one way, Sunil, I was at Sunil's company, so I have a bit of a feeling for some of their management. I had the impression you had a very responsive management at your organization. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So these are not a lot of guys standing in the way and refusing to get rid of their old habits. So you're working with some pretty good folks there for a start. So that's a plus. Secondly, I guess the proof is in their use. Get people to try it. Have a facilitator there that knows what they're doing, so it's not a shambles, not a disaster. Okay, so if they try it a few times, I've been through this tough situation with companies a lot tougher than yours, Sunil. Your people were real gentlemanly and ladylike by comparison. I was in the one organization; it was a major bank, and these guys are tough guys that showed up in their three-piece suits and are like small gods, executive vice presidents and things like this. They were awful. And yet we got them to use the scorecard a few times and it worked. And the proof was in the pudding, as it were. And thirdly, there's been a lot of research done. There's been a lot of research done that shows that scorecards do work and that people like them and they do represent reality much better than other approaches. Now, no approach is perfect. And obviously we can't guarantee 100% success any more than we could guarantee 100% success using some tool at the racetrack. But give it a try. Provide some training, a little chalk talk before the session starts, and also use the evidence from other companies. And if you need some help, I can give me a shout. Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Building on that question, Noel Sobelman has a question. He's found that it's hard to get leaders to engage in doing this, and is it better to sort of push them and in order to do the scoring, or to have the scoring done by knowledgeable empowered portfolio analysis team, and then have the executive review it? So what do you do to get the engagement or agreement? Yeah, Anita, you need to unmute yourself or use whatever magic got you talking before.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's weird. My it keeps muting me on its own. I don't know. Let me know if it mutes again. Thanks, Jim. Yeah. So coming from Lego, I have quite some experience now for the past 8 years on playful learning. And I do find that is a great way to engage. And a lot of times senior leaders, they don't have a tool, right? So it's from nothing to now having structure. And if that structure is, it's not taking away the decision from senior leaders, it's a decision support tool. And if it's fun to work with and you do see the value coming out of it, it's not a persuasion, it's a journey into learning, to using the tool. So as Bob, I have not experienced that there has been that barrier. As long as you make sure that you have a mediator that's making it fun and engaging and not being like a heavy spreadsheet exercise where you go like, oh, sorry, this is huge. I have to prepare all of these columns. Yeah, then it's that. But you want it to be fun and engaging, and you want to focus on the outcome of the exercise.
And you have found that you can do that. I think the question was, how do you, your way of doing it is to make it engaging and and engage people as in the learning part of it, but it can
you can
might not have the culture of Lego.
Yeah, well, you can see with somebody like Anita up at the front of the room in front of a group of her fellow executives, she's a pretty engaging person, and you need somebody like that who is a little charismatic, who's going to make this work in the room, who's a good quote salesperson. But the proof really is in the use of it. I would not recommend having an expert group off in the corner pre-scoring the project and then presenting the results to the gatekeepers, because the decision isn't theirs. and you know they're going to debate it and second guess it and what have you, and then you've just wasted a whole bunch of pre-work. So that's probably a bad thing to do. No, let the gatekeepers do their own scoring, and have a good facilitator, as I say, that has been through this, been around the block on this, knows what they're doing. If you don't have a good facilitator, hire one temporarily. I mean, I used to get hired regularly by companies that come in for the first 6 gate meetings to make sure that the senior people behaved.
Exactly, and on top of that, in the first couple of maybe critical points, what you can also do as a facilitator is to bring in a company I brought in Procter & Gamble, for instance, on some of these changes, because they had the facts, they've done the work, the homework, right, in their context. On its own, it will not go all the way, but it's a great start to show, well, if it works really well here, what did they do, what were their learnings? So that can also be, with the IRI is a great network to also meet companies that have tried this and have success with it.
I could see how this could also help executives recognize where their strategy is not yet clear enough for people to innovate into, or where they have big disagreements at that level. There's a question from Kevin, and it's really about, should the new product development portfolio be separate or integrated with enterprise-wide? Kevin, can you elaborate on your question?
Yeah, I mean, just to provide you with a little bit of context, my scenario here was I was working for Nestle Waters, and we had an innovation, idea to launch type process that then sat next to kind of a capital investment, approval stage gate process. And then we brought in, McKinsey transformation. So in one particular context, I had an innovation project that required a little bit of capital that was generating value for the business through transformation, and we literally had to run this initiative through 3 independent processes supported by 3 independent systems. And so really kind of challenged the notion of why not, really integrate all these things, and recognizing that, okay, the portfolios might need different stakeholders and different information to make a decision, but at the end of the day, it's one initiative that's generating value for the business. So why really run it through 3 systems as opposed to 1 here?
No, it's a tough one, and I'm Bob, I'm sure you also have. I just want to say I'm there. I have a product, like a physical Lego product that needs to go to market, and I'm running it through the sustainability portfolio. And literally, we had to have our executive 2 executive leaders meet to make the decision to have this little project run, because it's separate portfolios. So I'm with you, Kevin. It's not easy, but on the other hand, one size doesn't fit all. So you would run with I would still go for the separate ones, and those little odd ones you have, maybe if you can do like a speedboat to have those projects run. But I don't know, Bob, if you have any reflections on that.
Kevin, you're in the US, I assume, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
I was just out bicycling with a friend of mine who used to be president of Nabisco in the US. And he was telling me about one of his most important gate meetings on a product called Snackwell. You familiar with that product?
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, it was fine. It was a great success in its day, and it was finally retired. I think it was one of the earlier, fun to eat foods that's actually good for you. But in any event, he was telling me as president how the gate meeting was a very tough one, et cetera, et cetera. So I have some sympathy for you guys at Nabisco, given the kind of challenges he was describing, admittedly from a decade or so ago, or 2 decades maybe. As Anita says, this will largely depend on your company and its culture and processes, and no one size is going to fit all. So unless Anita and I were there to sort of look at your situation, I don't think we can make that call. I will tell you that some companies, like Exxon, for example, big company, lots of bureaucracy, et cetera. Exxon actually have something like 12 or 13 different stage gate type processes and types of gate meetings. They use stage gate for oil well drilling, for pipeline construction, for CapEx projects, for internal IT projects. So they got a different process, but it looks a lot like, they all look a lot like each other. So there's some similarities, but obviously the people are going to be different, and the decision makers, the locus of decision making is going to be different. So, you know, it's impossible to answer that without getting into A, the type of projects you're doing, and B, your org structure, you know, because sometimes these guys are in very different locations in the company. So a tough one to answer, but probably a good one to address.
I think, and that just to build on a little bit of your comment here, and I definitely appreciate your perspective, because it is a challenge to find a one size fits all, and I don't think it should be one size fits all. I think in the concept of agile, right, you want something that you can tailor to the context of that project, but at the end of the day, not reinvent the wheel and duplicate things unnecessarily. And I think that's where, you know, to the extent that you need an executive team to make a decision on something, right, that the information is presented the same way, you know, and at the gate, you know, meetings have a similar cadence and flow, but again, the stakeholders may be different. Okay, today we're doing an innovation portfolio, next we're doing CapEx. But again, the challenge that I had is, you know, an $80,000 CapEx investment project, very insignificant for a new product launch that was also supporting transformation. And I had the CMO required to prove the same project in 2 different systems. It's just, you know,
it reminds me of a situation, that same clay company whose portfolio review I just showed you. I don't want to mention their names because there's some, they were finding ridiculous things like that too. They had to go through a gate 3 meeting or gate 4 meeting to go to production or something like that in their stage gate process. And then it had to go to the financial review committee for the same decision to approve the CapEx. And some of the same people were there at both meetings. And so what they did, and that was just one example of many stupid things that happened in their process. So one of the things they did is they did this, they brought in this lean approach where you do a value stream analysis, where you look at everything that happens in the process. You map it out on a long piece of paper, you know, a 30-foot long piece of paper on a wall, you know, a bunch of very knowledgeable guys, map it out and do a value stream analysis. You know, value stream analysis to get rid of all that nonsense. And they were able to eliminate lots of meetings and lots of stupid overlaps and things like that. So maybe that's a good exercise. In fact, Anita, you were mentioning your good friend Bob Jorgensen earlier. I think they did that at their company and found that not only was it a good exercise, but they were able to cut their time to market, he claims, by 50%. Yeah. I find that a little extreme, but that's what he says. I'm sure you've heard him make that explanation too.
Yeah, I think it was 50 to 60 actually. And he's saying that that's not only the lead time was reduced by half, but it was an entirely different product that came to market with a much higher value. So yeah.
So you know, lean methodology, value stream mapping is a really good exercise to get rid of that the nonsense that you sort of described, of the same guy being at 2 different meetings to make the same decision. Okay, good question.
There's another question from Joshua from a legal perspective, which is about the strength of IP and how that comes into the model, the value-based scorecard. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, I was interested in just how the strength of an IP position can come into play, because commercial success can depend on IP from the standpoint of avoiding risk and the protection of differentiators. Does that come into the factor 5 of the risk analysis, or where else might it fit? And I guess it's a question for either Anita or Bob on that.
Anita, do you want to handle? Are you a legal beagle?
Oh, I can go first. Well, yeah. So it depends again on what you do IP wise. So I can share that we have just had a new homegrown IP launch, and that came from the strategy. So that was part of the strategic approach that we wanted at Lego Group. It's called Dreams, and you can hopefully you'll see some commercials around the Lego Dreams. We hope it becomes a new Ninjago, right? So that is where we have scored it from the strategic standpoint, that we need to have a homegrown IP. But it can also be that it's a tie on IP, you know, somewhere else, and then it's a risk. So it's not clear cut. It depends on what you want to do with the IP.
Yeah, and the other place I see it sometimes being raised is in product advantage, that customer energizer one. Obviously, if you have product advantage now, but it's not sustainable, I mean, hello, you know, it's not going to get a very high score. Most people would say, well, you know, it's a unique superior product for 3 weeks. Come on. and then it's going to be copied by everybody, etc. So it's not going to score as well there as it would have had you had a sustainable competitive advantage. And the other place it might it comes up a lot, especially when the new product is building off an existing intellectual property position you already have. Let's say you've got some customized know-how that nobody else has that's protected. So that would be leveraging a core competency. That would be treated as a core competency. You know, we got this technology nobody else has. Therefore, it's leveraging very, very clearly off that technological base. Fair enough, then,
Yeah.
Josh?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you got to use common sense here too, you know, as you go through this.
Yeah.
Not every phrase and every little detail and the word legal is not going to appear in every criterion, but you got to use common sense.
Thanks.
Agreed. Thanks.
Nate has a couple of questions. Nate, I'll let you decide which you'd like to ask first.
Yeah, appreciate that, James. Well, we're running short on time, but I pose these questions mostly because there's some pretty fantastic storytellers here, and I love anecdotal stories. We are, as a process facilitator, process manager, very interested in some different approaches in structuring gate meetings for the sake of building better adoption, business experimentation. And so we've been doing things more ad hoc, and curious from those that have gone before me, if you have some feedback about some wins or things that have happened when you structure things on more of a recurring basis to build a lot more data quickly, to get through business experimentation more quickly. So Anita, I'm thinking from a agile perspective, you know, what things have you learned, or what might you be able to share?
Well, I have some pretty extreme examples, and I don't know if they're for everyone around this table, but E.ON in Sweden have done a very radical thing. They have actually made the project teams the gatekeepers of their of the whole portfolio. So every 3 months, they meet everybody and they vote for which projects need to move on, and then they have these scorecards, and they, you know, present, you know, like high pitch, you know, this is our project, this is what we're going to do for the next 3 months, and they actually commit the resources to the ones that are voted the highest. So that's a really extreme case. They still do it. I just heard from the agile coaches there, and that works really well for them. I think that is an organizational unit of about 300 new product development engineers in electronic software space. So that is something you can do. Another thing that I've also seen a couple of times is the concept of the Dragon's Den. So it's little entrepreneurial kind of spirit where
That's
you
hold on. That's Dragon's Den in Scandinavia and Canada, Shark Tank in the US.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that concept basically, where you have the stakeholders meeting, but instead of like a typical steerco meeting, you actually do have the value focus. So it's a lot more like you go in, you pitch your idea, you know, on from a value-based point of view. And then the questions are made around the value. A lot of times you would even bring the customer to share their excitement about an early prototype. So, you know, that's also coming from the agile, but from the need of an agile stage gate portfolio management to have those gate meetings become fun and engaging and value focused.
I think one of the interesting things here is one of the complaints we often hear about gate meetings is we have the senior people not quite behaving as they should. And I've seen more than one company, you're smiling there, Nate. I've seen more than one company, the gatekeepers were finally persuaded we need some rules of the game. Otherwise we are going to have chaos. And the first rule is we got to be there. Okay. That gee, at the last minute, I got a phone call and I can't come is just not acceptable. I recall a number of years back sitting at the Rittenhouse Hotel in downtown Philly, working with a chemical company, not to be named here, on developing a set of rules. We call them the Rittenhouse rules, I think, at Rittenhouse Square there, right in Philly. You know that. And it was things like, you got to be there, you got to come prepared, no reading at the meeting. You know, you got to have an open mind and listen to the other people. You got to let the project team present for their 10 minutes or 15 minutes, 10 slides max, etc. But there were also some rules of the game for the project team, like, you know, maximum number of deliverables, 5 pages, 10 slides max, 15 minutes on stage max, that sort of thing. So just some simple little rules to keep it from degenerating or devolving into a chaotic, messy, horrible meeting that everyone says that's the last time I'll ever go to that meeting. Okay, and as Anita keeps saying, you got to make it engaging. You got to make it a little bit of fun. So that's your job, Nate. You're a pretty good guy and a fun guy, and I think your job is to get up there and be the MC. Play the role of Jimmy Fallon or something like that.
Well, we're
That's a tall ask.
out of time, but I know that Bob, you'll stick around. I know, Anita, you've got house guests, so maybe not.
Yeah.
But we'll maybe stick around for another 5 or 7 minutes if people have the time and would like to ask more questions. I think you could, if you do have a question, raise your hand, your virtual hand, or pop something into the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, just another question I'd be interested to get Bob's perspective on, because I found that, what's often lacking is the assignment of a sponsor that's high enough in the organization, ideally the executive level, and making sure that they've got the right level of engagement to support the project or the portfolio manager. But I'd be curious to see or get Bob's perspective, how much of an opportunity that really is here in really supporting a streamlined and effective process here, including, kind of related to the last point here of managing the rest of the executive stakeholders that support the portfolio decision.
Okay, well, obviously, if again, different organizations have different structures, but if you have somebody like Nate here, who is sort of in charge of this initiative, right, Nate? You there still?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're sort of in charge. Who do you report to?
I report to Director of Innovation.
Okay, so that's like a vice presidential level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he's got a pretty high level. That man or woman, I can't remember who it was.
Man. Yep.
Okay. That guy's pretty senior in the company. He's 1 level below the president, 2 levels below the president. So fairly senior. Okay. So obviously, if you need help, you go to that guy and he gives you the help he needs. And I think that's generally typical, that the person that's in charge of the system, whatever you want to call her or him, the head of the PMO, the portfolio manager, the process manager, etc., usually reports very high. Sometimes to the head of R&D or RD&E, sometimes to the head of marketing, sometimes to both of them.
Yeah, having that sponsorship and support is, in my experience, extremely helpful. It just creates a little bit more of a collaborative nature, better feedback, better response. It's worked well.
Okay. Anita, you're still here. We let you go to your guests, but because we're going to wind up in a minute now, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm all right. It's they can grill the sausages on their own.
Okay, so what would you say? Who did you report to when you were running the transformation?
I was reflecting on what Nate is saying, and I would say, you need that VP sponsor for your project to really get the priority that you need. A lot of times when, at least when I've been part of introducing Agile into the Agile stage gate, we've been saying in order to make it successful, we need that link to the VP sponsor to make sure that it gets the attention it needs, especially when you're changing ways of working. So then you look back, could we have had the same amount of success just with the old ways of working with the VP sponsor? I don't think so, right? But it definitely helps. And not having it is where you lack the resources. People will say, yeah, but no, I have to prioritize something else. My boss is saying I have to go over here, right? And that's when you really lose the attention of the project.
Yeah.
So you want to go and have that really senior sponsor for your project, definitely.
I heard a comment from the president about $1 billion business. Well, not the biggest business in the world, but not the smallest either. And he said a very wise thing to me. He said, these gate meetings are some of the most important meetings in our company. I go to them. I said, why do you go to them? You're a busy guy. You're the CEO. He says, I go to them because it's only the future of our company. We are deciding the future of our company at these meetings, for goodness sake. It's like an investment meeting when you're in the stock market business, you know, an investment company. You know, these investment decision meetings are the most important meetings you can have. So be there. Right, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. Don, we'll have our last question. Don White has a question about the opportunity feasibility matrix. Do you want to talk about that, Don, or ask a question? Is Don still online?
He's there.
Yeah, I am.
Go ahead.
So it was just I loved it. I loved the tools. The opportunity feasibility matrix was great. I was just wanting, because it's such a great visual tool conveying information, I was wondering whether you'd considered adding extra information, you know, traditionally taking the size of the circle for either potential return or investment, and why you hadn't in the example.
I'll let Anita handle that.
Oh yeah, the circle size of the circles is a classic, right? So yeah, that definitely is providing that extra dimension, right? But you want to take it stepwise. So if you introduce everything at once, it might be overwhelming for for your colleagues. So go with the matrix first. If they love it, great. Let's have that dialogue, and then you can add the size on the circles later on to say, actually, this is the investment side we need. Now that's the so you want to go stepwise into that learning journey is at least my experience. But I don't know what you say, Bob.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing, I think we're used to seeing those 2x2 matrices from the original Boston Consulting Group model, or GE model, right? Where we have market attractiveness and business position as the two axes, and you would plot on the matrix business areas or business units or sometimes products. But what we're showing on this is not different opportunities. We're showing the same opportunity, but different people. If you look at the dots on there, think about that. So we can't show the size of the circle as this guy's more important than another guy, or maybe we could.
Maybe he is.
Okay, but you know, we're not showing different opportunities, different magnitudes, different resource commitments here. We're showing different people. Now, maybe it is worthwhile thinking. I mean, we did try to do that at one well-known consumer packaged goods company, try to weight people based on their success at making correct decisions in previous scoring models. And that lasted about one meeting before the whole place almost ended up in a fist fight. Okay, when you actually tried to put weights on people because some people were better at making the call. So I think we got to be a little careful of that one. By the way, I have seen that the 2x2 matrix shown as two 2x2 matrices with different axes, you know, sort of value, reward, and likelihood of success being the three axes. That's sort of a three-dimensional diagram. So there's those as well. So there are different variants of that. If anyone's interested, they can drop me an email or Anita an email. I guess we got to get going, guys, because
yeah, we did have a request. We did have a request for the slides, if you're able to share them.
Yeah, no problem. I want to fix that one slide. There was an error. I had changed it at the last minute. That was one of mine, and I'll fix it and send it back
and
to
Victoria
Tammy.
will send it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob and Anita, thank you so much. That was a great discussion. Lots of good questions, very thought-provoking. Yeah, we really appreciate your time and your continued publication in RTM.
Okay. Thanks then, Jim, and thank you, Tammy. Was very helpful. A special word of thanks to Tammy. She was very helpful in terms of pulling this article together, and so are you, Jim, because you got us focused on the right things. So thank you guys for that. You don't realize how much work these folks do in your association for making things happen, such as that excellent journal.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
So